Ever heard of Mexican jumping beans? They really exist. They're real beans and they do jump. There's a little beastie inside that makes them move around to make the bean get out of the hot sun. But you can make your own. You can make them in a couple of ways. The first way is pretty easy if you can get the stuff. If you go along to a chemist, you might find that they'll sell you empty drug capsules. They're made of gelatin, and normally, of course, they're packed with medicines and things. But if you're lucky, you can find a chemist who'll sell them empty, or at least provide you with one or two. And all you have to do is to get preferably a largish one, pull those two halves apart because they slide into each other, get a ball bearing that is going to be a loose fit, but not too loose, and you can see it sits in the bottom of that capsule, and slide the cap on again. And if you want to, seal it up with glue. And you can see because that capsule's got round ends and a heavy weight inside it, as you try and move it, it flips end to end. The heavy weight makes it tumble over itself. So if you put it on a slope, it should jumping bean its way down. Let's have a look. Here it goes. Well, that's going pretty fast because it's a big one, and the big ones really do work better than the smaller ones. But you can try them with different sizes and set a whole lot going and see how they perform. Here we go. A whole fleet of trained jumping beans going down the slope. You notice the bigger ones go faster and rather better than the little ones. Well, if you can't get one of those capsules, don't despair, because there's another way of making these, and in some ways it's even better. You go to aluminium foil and you make sure before you start that you've got quite a large ball bearing. Remember, larger is better. One about that size is pretty well ideal. And put that aside for the next step, which is to find a stick just a bit bigger in diameter than the ball. That pen would possibly do, but it looks a little bit close for comfort. This doweling, I think, is just right. You'll notice it's a little bit bigger than the ball. We're going to make a tube around the doweling, and the ball has to slide freely in it, and so I think that's the size to pick. What do we make the tube from? Namely, aluminium foil. Here we are. I've doubled the thickness over to make it a little bit stronger, and I want a strip of that double thickness, I suppose about so wide, and I suppose about as long as that. And I wrap that tightly as I can around the stick that I've chosen. If you don't do it tightly, then it's going to come unstuck on the ramp, the ball bearing will run out of it, and your tumbler simply won't tumble. There we are, a good tight tube, and once you're happy that it's got no wrinkles left in it, like that, slide it to the end, keep it tight around the stick, and just crimp that end over by pressing it in with your finger. It doesn't have to be greatly crimped, but it should be enough to seal that end over, close the tube off, and in fact hold the whole thing together. That should be about right. Now I can slide it off, and I should find that the ball bearing drops down very loosely inside, and it does. This is tricky. Poke this end in, crimp it with your fingers, and just close it off so that the ball can't come out. In fact, so that you can't see a hole down inside. Now that wouldn't tumble as it is because it's too rough and it's all a bit bent. We have to hammer it so that those ends are rounded like the capsule. You do that by putting the whole thing into a matchbox. It should fit into the tray like that, put the cover on, and shake it very vigorously back and forth. Now, while you're doing that, especially corner to corner, it means that the ball bearing is going to hammer at the inside of that tube and round the ends out. It also mean that it's going up and down the tube and there's no chance of it sticking. So when you take it out, it should look rather like that. Hasn't unwrapped, it's got rounded ends, and I think that'll perform pretty well. Let's give it a test. Over to the ramp, set it up there, and let it go. And it goes like a ripper. In fact, it goes so well and it's so heavy it can tow a bit of a weight. So that if you make a good one, a good strong one, you can stick onto it a little face, be careful not to crush it in your fingers, put a lightweight paper body, set it up here, give it a push, and you've got your own erratic tumbling man. A final word about jumping beans, because you can use those, or the aluminium type, in a little puzzle you can make. It's an old puzzle called The 5 Babies and the Nursemaid. You have to start with a box. If you use the big aluminium ones, use a big box. Little capsules, use a little box. I'm using a little one because it's easier to show you. You cut it down to make a tray, and inside that you stick cardboard partitions like this. 5 beds for the babies, and 1 up here on the wall for the nursemaid. All I did was to get a cardboard matchbox cover, cut it up and stick them together like that, but it's easy enough to work out a way of doing those. 5 beds and one on the side. Then into that you plonk your jumping beans. And as you might have guessed, you have 5 babies, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1 nursemaid. If you want to make it a lot harder, take one of those out and replace it with a slightly different coloured or sized nursemaid. The object of the game is to move them around so the nursemaid ends up in there and a baby ends up in each of those beds. Of course, it's rather like the old roller ball round sort of puzzle, but they tumble instead of rolling. It's a lot harder, as you can see. They move as they did down the slope. But of course, they can easily fall out of there or be knocked off by people who want a jumping bean of their own, so it's best to seal it off with either a bit of shirt box cover to make a clear plastic finish, or if you can't get that, an old plastic bag stretched over and taped will be fine. And it's a sealed game, and it will take you a lot of time and effort to get them in the right beds.
Curiosity.